Good evening, everyone. Thank you all for tuning in tonight for our panel on prevention of racial bullying. We have 16 members who serve on our commission, including representation of parents, different youth organizations in town, the YMCA, the Elmhurst Library, District 205, the SROs, which are police officers at York, and the Park District, to name a few. Our mission is to bring education on social peer issues like this evening, as well as issues around teen depression, anxiety, drug alcohol prevention, and we host the yearly Job and Volunteer Fair. We are live on Elmhurst TV YouTube channel tonight. I'd like to thank Joe and Dan and his team for being here and recording this event to bring it into your homes. We're also honored to have a great panel of expertise with us this evening. We have Kiana Winters. She is a licensed clinical social worker, a therapist at Midwest Counseling and Diagnostics. She has an emphasis on racial identity on her doctorate. We also have Stephen Burrow. He is a licensed clinical social worker as well in private practice. He works with the City of Elmhurst and primarily with the police department here in town. We have Tracy Orrick. She is the social worker at Elmhurst Public Library. She is here to discuss resources and programming that they do at the library, and specifically about this topic as well. We are also very honored to have a special young lady on the phone with us this evening, Cassidy, a 17-year-old who is a student here in town. She'll be virtual as well with Tracy from the library this evening to talk about her experience in regard to racial tension and bullying that she has felt. Her mother, Victoria, is also with us discussing some of the parenting point of views of issues on this topic. And I will be moderating the event this evening. I'm also an LCPC, a licensed therapist in private practice. If you have any questions during this forum tonight, I will be checking emails. Please feel free to email me at jackie.haddad-tamer@elmhurst.org. And that's JACKIE.HADDAD-TAMER@elmhurst.org. I know this is a difficult time for us. We're doing this virtually, so I would appreciate if everyone can be patient as we navigate through this. We've got some here. We have some calling in here at City Hall, and some are calling in virtually. So we'll first go around to the panel, and they can introduce themselves. And if you guys don't mind, just please tell us a little bit about yourselves and what you do. Kiana, why don't we go ahead and start with you?
Okay. So I'm also LCPC, Jackie. Nothing against social workers. But I've been in practice for the last 10 years, primarily with addictions, seeing a lot of disparities that happen in the Black community. I've started to work in diversity and inclusion. And so currently I work with some veterans and also active duty members doing diversity and inclusion and trying to make sure that in all aspects within the system that we are addressing this issue.
Thank you, Kiana. Thank you for being here tonight, too. Stephen.
First off, thanks for having me. I am a licensed clinical social worker with my foot in a couple of different arenas. The first is as a social worker in private practice, working primarily through the Elmhurst Police Department. I'm used in a couple of different ways there. I'll have officers go out on a call, and they might recognize that a family or a certain situation could use some counseling, and they'll give that family or that individual my information. Also drop-ins to the police department. As people come in with any issues that they might have, the staff at the front desk often will give out my information for those people or individuals to call me. I'm also used kind of for the messy stuff, so homicide, suicide, death notifications, if they need someone out there while the officers can process and do the investigation that they need to do. I'll stay with the family and process with them, and then often stay with them for however long they need support. In addition to that, I'm also at a local high school as a social worker for the self-contained population, so students who would normally be outplaced. These are students with significant emotional and behavioral disabilities.
Wonderful. Well, great. I'm glad you're here as well. Thank you. Tracy is with the library. If you don't mind introducing yourself, you can you there?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Yes. Thank you.
So my name is Tracy Ork. I'm the social service specialist at Elmhurst Public Library. I also have my CADC for addictions prior to coming to the library here. I worked in Chicago, on the west side of Chicago, in a Cook County clinic doing substance abuse counseling. And then I got my degree in social work and moved here to the library. The population I serve is anybody and everybody that comes through the library. I did do a lot of stuff with the teens pre-pandemic. That obviously has kind of gone away now. But yeah, I help people with everything from anxiety to helping them find a job to navigating anything on the internet, whatever they might need.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for being here as well.
You're welcome.
Okay, to get started, I think it's first important to dive into what bullying is. For purposes for this evening, we'll focus on kids and students. So many times kids don't even realize that they're being bullied. And some kids don't even realize that what they're doing and their actions and their words actually is bullying. So to define it by the American Counseling Association, they define it as intentional, unwanted, and aggressive behavior that is often repeated in relationships with a perceived power difference. I think that perceived power difference is a big piece on what we're talking about here this evening. Generally, researchers classify bullying behaviors into 4 different categories: physical, verbal, relation, and cyber. Physical bullying is the hitting, the kicking, the spitting to a child. It also can involve taking or damaging another student's property. Verbal bullying includes verbal statements such as name-calling, teasing, or making threats. And the relation bullying is the attempts to damage the child's reputation by spreading rumors, ignoring the kid, or telling others not to be friends with them. And then finally, cyberbullying is using electronic media such as email, texting, any sort of social media, intentionally to harm another kid. And I also want to point out October happens to be the National Bullying Prevention Month, and Unity Day is October 21st. So, Kiana, what do you think about bullying? Do you think that that's an accurate definition?
Absolutely. I think one of the most tragic trends that we're seeing is this combination between relational bullying and cyberbullying, where, especially during the pandemic, where a lot of teens are either ignoring one another, are getting in groups, virtually and not liking someone else's post purposely to isolate them, and also I've seen fights on Instagram. There's fights on TikTok. There's a lot of racial remarks that are being made there on some of these sites.
Right, thank you.
Yeah.
Stephen, how about you? Anything to add about defining bullying?
Sure. I think it's one of those things that we can have a universally accepted definition of. However, I don't think you're going to get everyone to accept all of the pieces of it.
Yeah.
I would also say with the younger generation, anybody born after 98, they have always had social media as a part of their life. They have grown up with it. We're used to the bullying ending at 3 or 3:20 at the end of the school day. This has now continued 24/7. They will go to bed with a phone in their hand. They will wake up with a Chromebook in their lap at school. This does not end at the door. And I'll also say that kids and anyone, really adults or children, it's a function of control. They want some sort of control, and unfortunately, if they find out and they realize that the bullying can give them some control, it's just going to add more to that desire to continue to do it if there's nothing that's done to stop it.
Yeah. You're so right. They don't receive that break. We used to walk out the door at 3 o'clock. You don't have to put up with any peer social stuff unless you happen to walk out in your neighborhood. And nowadays, it's constant. So you go to bed at night and first thing in the morning. It's a really good point.
Yeah, and I think it's a lot faster as well. So things hit other children a lot faster, and so the word spreads.
Having worked in a high school, there will be a fight at 8 a.m. and I will have a student showing me the video of it by about 8:08.
Right.
and then the entire school knows. And that's the same for if somebody calls out somebody to make fun of them for something they're wearing, or somebody slipped in the cafeteria. It doesn't just, hey, did you hear about what happened? It's everybody knows. And it's not just applicable to the standard, the non-biased bullying, but the biased bullying that we're now seeing, and that research is being explored, where it's one specific thing. So it's race, it's gender identity, it's culture.
Religion.
Absolutely, exactly.
Religion, culture. Yeah. Tracy on the phone, is there anything you'd like to add about just kind of defining bullying and what that looks like?
I think they covered pretty much every thought I had, but, I see definitely, like Stephen said, the increase in the cyberbullying. It's a 24/7 thing now that kids have to deal with, and everyone knows about it then. When it's something that's put up on social media or something like that, people that don't even go to their school may know about it. So it's just so much more wide-reaching and broader now that I think it's just causing even more damage than, like you guys had said before, at 3:20 when you leave and you go back to your life at home. It's a never-ending constant cycle of barrages that can come in from all these social media outlets.
Absolutely. And I know, talking to a few of us beforehand, we discussed how kids sometimes don't know that what they're doing is actually bullying. I think that is something that, especially at a younger age, which later elementary and middle school, they don't know. You just see sometimes actions taking place, words being said, and people, laughing, right?
Yeah.
And they think it's funny. And even sometimes the person that's being bullied is laughing too, because you're supposed to be my friend. Why would you do something like that? So, Kenny, can you touch on what you see today for issues involving youth and race and bullying, and however you want to look at that?
Yeah, I see a lot of teenagers and young adults using the social media in particular to bully people about their appearance, to bully them about things that they can't normally change, right? I can't change the color of my skin. I can't change how my hair grows out of my head, right? And so you see a lot of bullying in terms of religion as well, saying very adult things that they probably have heard from other grown-ups, from YouTube, and mimicking that behavior on their own sites, and not necessarily knowing that's not something that they should be doing, that it's not age appropriate, but they're copying a lot of what they see on social media as well, and so it takes them to another level. And so if parents aren't necessarily watching what children are doing, they're not monitoring, they don't necessarily know what they're watching, what they're mimicking.
Right. What could we, when you start thinking about this, like, what do we want kids to understand about this? What is something we want to get across to them and for understanding to walk away this evening with?
Yeah, I think it reminds me of a story one time during Black History Month, and I'm having a conversation with my son about what he learned in school, and he was saying, I didn't know this happened to Black people. Why are they treating Black people this way? And I said, well, I made a comment about us. And he said, but Mom, I'm beige, right? So having an understanding that children are working from a very low, basic understanding of what race is and the social construct of race, they just know that people look different. Right? They don't know why we look different. They just know that, you're a girl, I'm a boy, you might have a different skin tone or different hair, but they don't know that concept of race. And so I think what I would want parents definitely to walk away with is having that uncomfortable conversation with their children and making sure that they sit down and start from the very beginning about, why do they call certain people who look pink white? And why do they call brown people beige, or, all these other things, so they understand what some of these concepts mean. And then going through and sitting and watching TV with them or watching YouTube with them to see what they're, absorbing and explain, well, this is why some people would say that, or this is why, that person made this comment. and letting them know in your own opinion whether that's right or wrong. You want the information to come from them. And I think lastly, what I would want the kids to know is that it's very unfortunate to be bullied about something you can't change, right? And so if I come in a certain body type, if I come in a certain skin tone, that's not something I can change. It's not something I've chosen. And so to be bullied about something I can do nothing about is just really, bad.
Thank you. I think this is a good time to go into Cassidy and her story. Cassidy, are you there on the phone?
Yes, I am. Can you guys hear me okay?
I can hear you, maybe a little bit louder. Are you
Can you
there?
hear me now?
Okay. Great. Cassidy, again, thank you so much for being here this evening and really just stepping up and wanting to share your story. I think that's just dynamic of you, and you're quite a champion in your cause, too, and I really appreciate what you're doing this evening. Could you please go ahead and let us know a little bit about what prompted you to want to be part of this and what's been going on for you, please?
Yes, of course. Thank you so much for having me, Jackie. I'll just start off by introducing myself. Hi, everyone. I'm Cassidy. I'm 17 years old, and I go to York High School. I'm a senior, and I'm vice president of York High School's Black Student Union Club. Recently, I was just elected vice president, and I'm also on the varsity track team. And I'm very happy that I was offered to speak at this segment tonight, knowing there's no other kids here. I'm glad to be here as a voice and representation for BSU and any other kids that are scared to speak out against bullying and racial injustice in our school, because I've recently been getting more involved in activism and speaking just from my heart about everything. And to start off with personal experience, I can say my first encounter with actual bullies started when I was in middle school, about from 6th grade to 7th grade. It was just your average bullying. I didn't really know anyone. Kids were just picking on me and making fun of my nose, whatever, how I looked, or just dumb things that you would hear kids bully about in movies. And eventually I decided to stand up and stand my ground and say, no, I can't tolerate this anymore, and figure out exactly who I am. And once I put an end to it, I finally just was able to roll over the bullies and ignore them. So from 8th grade all the way till about last May, I went from being bullied to being a threat to bullies, because I have a pretty decent-sized platform being vice president of the BSU and on the varsity track team. A lot of people know who I am, and it's very warming that a lot of kids can come to me, no matter their age or grade, and they just talk to me about literally anything, on any social media platform I have. Some people have my numbers, and I'm kind of here. It's just a warm spot, and sometimes kids will come to me before they go to a counselor because they feel like the advice that they're seeking they could get from a kid better than they could from an adult. And most recently, the bullying has kind of started again, but this time it is more racial involved. And I can say that racial bullying versus normal bullying is 10 times more horrendous to me personally than normal bullying. It is, kids are not attacking me because, oh, I can't run as fast as someone, or people just think I'm weird. They're attacking me for something I can't control, which is the color of my skin. So that is why it hurts and just cuts deep even more. And it all started at Elmhurst having its first Black Lives Matter protest. It was maybe a week or so after that, and it was on a Monday. I had posted something on Instagram. It was either a petition for George Floyd or something like that. I don't necessarily remember. And I got a notification on my phone from a kid at my school that I've never talked to before. We've never spoken to each other ever. And I opened it, and he had typed out in a chat, he called me the N-word with the hard R. And before I could even process it, he deleted the chat right away. It's kind of like a gag that kids do in my school. One of your friends dares you to type something in a chat that you would never say to someone's face. You count to 3, then you delete it. It's a really dumb thing that kids do around here. I don't know why they do it. And he did that to me, and I kind of just froze, and I didn't react fast enough or screenshot it, and then he deleted it. And I was just I was confused and mad. I didn't really know what to do because, well, first, we've never spoken before. Like, we've never spoken before. Like, it was so clear that we've never spoken before that I didn't even know what his political views were. So I was so confused on why he just did this to me. And he was just trying to, like, plain blow up, like, oh, I didn't type that. My friends did it, blah, 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 blah. So I told my mom about it. I told my dad. Like, it was the first racial encounter I've ever had with someone at my school, and it was crazy. Like, they didn't say it to my face, but it just felt worse coming from a social media platform. And I talked to some of my friends about it. We got in contact with the school. We dealt with it, and then that was that. And that moment right then and there kind of sparked me to want to do more with activism in this town, because I don't want kids thinking that they can just come to me and make fun of me for my skin color or antagonize me with racial slurs and think they can get away with it or it's affecting me in any way. Because to be honest, it doesn't really affect me, because all I know at the end of the day is that I'm going to be the bigger person, and I have higher opportunities in this town than the people that wanted to waste time during their day and antagonize me for the color of my skin. And ever since that day, I'll be getting random prank calls of people calling me fat or to kill myself or Black Lives Don't Matter, or like just mainly all that type of stuff politically. And it's just been, it kind of has slowed down a lot, but like the whole month of June, it was just really bad. Elmhurst had about 3 or 4 Black Lives Matter protests, and I made sure everyone knew that I was at every single one. People knew I was there. I posted about it, and then the prank calls start coming in later that night. People were blowing up my phone, somehow getting a hold of my number, leaving terrible messages in my inbox on Instagram or Snapchat. And I learned to put up a barrier and pretty much ignore it, because it was a small section of kids that were taking time out of their day to go out of their way and harass me for absolutely no reason. And kids would always ask me, how come you're not posting what they're saying to you or exposing them? Because one, I'm a varsity athlete, and I'm a vice president of BSU. I have an image to keep up, and I don't want to partake in petty social media conflict with kids in my grade. I know exactly who I am. So to be the bigger person, I decided if someone wants to talk to me in any type of way or harass me, I'm just going to let them say what they need to say, screenshot, take all my evidence, and just stay silent, and then just show my mom or talk to the school or somebody in higher power and get it over with, because that's the one thing I can do to completely diminish it at all. And I'm glad that I finally built up the strength and courage to pretty much mute all the people that want to attack any African-American kids in our school, because my school, York, is a predominantly white school. As many of you know, the African-American population is, I think it's like 3.5%, maybe it's lower. And I like how I'm a voice for Black students at our school. This is not an interview, but I've done 2 previous interviews with people in this town. The first was my school's news station, and the second was the owners of Brew Point. They did an interview with me, and I just spoke on like Breonna Taylor's death and things going on in this town. And I just finally decided that, yeah, I'm putting my foot down, and if I have to be the voice for Black kids in this town, then so be it. I'm only 17 years old, and there's a lot on my shoulders going on right now because of COVID and my new school routine. Mm-hmm. But I've learned that like I can put on an iron suit and just deal with it. Like I'm more than happy that I have all these opportunities coming to me, and I'm also part of this racial injustice Rotaract Club. Our leader, his name is Charlie, and I also encourage a lot of my friends that are liberal and support BLM and don't like racism to speak up and join BSU this year, because in previous years we kind of came off as our club was only for African American students, which is not true. So I made sure they knew this year we need your guys' help a lot. So I got maybe close to 30 new people to join our club this year. So
wonderful.
And yeah, so wonderful. I'm just really blessed for these opportunities that I've been gathering in the last couple months.
You've been carrying a lot on your shoulders, Cassidy, for many years. And a couple things. Well, first of all, thank you so much for being beyond brave to just get on here and tell this story. And I'm sitting in disbelief. Obviously, we hear stories, right? We hear them, but to hear this happening in our community, it just makes me so grateful that we are here tonight talking about these really difficult times and topic. A couple things that stood out to me, Cassidy, and was that you, from 8th grade till just recently, really didn't just kind of shut down about it. You really didn't say much about that. What do you guys think about it? Is that normal, what you guys see here from the panel, that we kind of shut down when that's going on?
I think what happens, and this is where the stereotype that African Americans are so resilient comes from, but we tend not to be believed when it happens. So you want to be careful about who you tell, and is that a safe person? And so to kind of hold it inside and deal with it because it's an everyday occurrence, it's typical in the Black community. Absolutely.
Yeah. And I also, I mean, you know, just with the bullying in general, I mean, you touched, Cassidy, on, you know, the piece of the racial piece, and I also do want to point out that that's, I think, with bullying anyway. And something happens that really provokes you to say, you know what, I'm not going to sit back anymore. You know, and it sounds like what's happened for you in May was the catalyst for you to be, you know what, I'm not going to be quiet about this anymore. I'm going to tell my mom, I'm going to tell my dad, I'm going to tell the school, I'm going to speak out, I'm going to say something, this isn't right. Because you said, I think you said it's like 10 times worse now, correct? Is that what you had said?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think I want to thank Cassidy also for her story and just remark that she's being absolutely mature about the situation. So, you know, thanks, Cassidy, for being so mature.
Yeah, really.
Yeah, of course. Thank you guys so much for having me speak out. And again, I am just so happy and blessed to be a part of all these opportunities and deal with a lot of the racism that is swept under the rug in my school. It is completely disrespectful to the minorities in our school. So it's time for change. It's time to be louder than we have been in the past years.
And Cassidy, we needed to hear your story tonight, and I really appreciate you coming on and doing this. Elmhurst needed to hear this, so thank you.
Yes, of course. Thank you for having me.
Stephen, was there anything else you wanted to add about
I just certainly hope that this speech will inspire other students, other youth at the middle school level, elementary school level, high school level, college level, to speak out, to let their stories be known. Because hearing this was extremely impactful. We've known that things like this happen, but to hear it from someone who has gone through it for years and years and years means so much more.
It really does. You're absolutely right. Tracy, you're still on the phone?
I am still here.
Okay.
Thank you, Cassidy, for sharing that. I was wondering if I could ask you a question. What advice would you give to a middle schooler or a high schooler that has been bullied in the way that you have, or in another way? What kind of advice would you give to them? Because, you know, sometimes it's hard for us adults to you know, understand what exactly you guys are going through.
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you for asking. I would say to a kid that's in middle school dealing with any type of bullying, especially racial bullying, is to just pause, tell them to pause and take a look at everything that's going around in the world right now, the conflict between BLM and All Lives Matter and Blue Lives Matter, or the increasing suicide rate of kids being bullied, and let them, and make sure they know that they are not alone, and that there's kids like me in almost every high school or in the grade above them that are going to be the shoulder that you can cry on. Like it was brought to my attention recently that there are no Black student unions or like Latina unions in the younger schools in this town, and I think that is a huge problem, because I can't even stress enough how many times I hear kids tell me that they hate going to their counselors because they're not telling them things that they need to hear or helping them. They just try to flip the conversation or pin their mistakes on them. So I feel like for the younger kids to reach out to the older kids or even kids in their grade is the first step that needs to happen, because I've seen with my own eyes kids are more comfortable speaking to other kids about situations like this. So something like that needs to be established in the schools, especially with the younger kids, because if they don't deal with it while they're at a younger school, it's just going to keep going through all the way till they're in high school, and it's never going to get dealt with. They need to know when they get to high school or college that there's going to be a safe holding spot for them, and that the bullying that they've endured over the last couple of months or years is going to be put to an end immediately.
Do you feel that some of this racist pieces that have happened to you or to other students, kind of what you were talking about, or other kids, that when you go to certain people, it's just been minimized or swept under the rug? I'm just making sure I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, I would say it definitely has been swept under the rug. I can say that there's been a lot of racial things happening in my school, and I hear about them, and I find out who did it, and I'm thinking, oh, they're going to get suspended, or like, the punishment is going to be worth what they did. No, it's really not like that. They really just get a slap on the wrist, and that's why a lot of minorities are depressed, because they feel like that they don't have a safeguard amongst the parents and the adults in the building that they attend 8 hours a day, and that's just not okay to me. As much as I love to hear kids reach out to me and help and have me help deal with their issues, I wish that they could go to an adult first, because it doesn't sit right with me that they don't feel protected or safe in their own school environment.
Mm-hmm.
What Cassidy said about going to an adult, a staff member in the school, and just being talked to highlights such an important issue.
Yeah.
That I think we can all agree on. It is so important for adults or staff members or mentors or guardians to just listen sometimes. You feel like sometimes you just want to talk at someone who comes to you with an issue. Sit back and just listen to what they have to say. Think about the platform that Cassidy has right now, where we're able to sit back and listen to what she has to say.
Yeah.
I don't know, Cassidy, I don't want to speak for you. I don't know if you've had an opportunity to say some of the things that you've said tonight in a forum like this.
Right.
No, I've not. This is my first time ever, really speaking to a group of people about a situation like this.
And it's hard to hear that at a school that you've spent 4 years at, or about to spend 4 years at, that you've heard story after story of just staff members talking to people, but they're not taking the time to listen to what actually is going on.
And she brings up two very good points. I think, first we need to increase our knowledge, right? So if you're uncomfortable having these racial conversations, mostly it's due to not having enough knowledge about what you want to say, and so it makes you uncomfortable. And so increasing your knowledge, being willing to have those uncomfortable conversations, and then addressing them, in the moment. And sometimes that has to do with the representation, right? If there's not a lot of exposure to other races, if students don't see teachers and counselors who look like them, they're less likely to go to those teachers and counselors because they may not feel that they understand. So representation is absolutely important, to just be able to have that conversation with students, and always be willing and open to do it, even if there is no representation there. Just the fact that you're willing will help them out a whole lot.
Completely agree.
Well said. Tracy, I know you're also on the phone. Is there anything else? It was a great question you asked that prompted more of this conversation. Anything else to add to what we were just talking about?
Well, I don't know if this is the right time, but the library is having a program on Tuesday about talking with your young children about race. So if there are any parents out there that are looking for some help in how to have those conversations in order to avoid situations like Cassidy's gone through, this may be a good program for them to look into.
Okay, and what time did you say it was on Tuesday?
It's on Tuesday, October 20th.
Okay.
At 7 p.m. and it's via Zoom. All our programming right now is via Zoom. And they can just go to our website and sign up for it.
Great. That's great to know. Wonderful. Thank you. We also have Cassidy's mom, Victoria, on the phone. Victoria, you still there?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay. Can you maybe get us started and talk to us a little bit about what your concerns are as a parent? Seeing this and having, I think it's wonderful Cassidy has come to you and you guys have this open relationship where, she's going to you about these things. She's communicating to you about this. What is your take on it as a parent going through these issues? And also, while we're talking about it, what would you like other parents to know?
Absolutely. Thank you, Jackie. I appreciate you guys having us here tonight. I want to first start by saying I know a lot of what Cassidy said is very hard to hear, and it's really hard to digest. And I think the message that I would like to relay to the parents of this town is that, we all love our children, and our children are not demons, and they're not perfect. Cassidy isn't perfect. I'm not perfect. So as we sit here, tonight to share our stories, we don't want to convey a, sense of, your children are horrible and, they've been doing all these crazy things. At the end of the day, they're kids, and it's up to us as parents to educate them and to help steer them in the right direction and to correct the behavior. So my message to the parents is, first and foremost, to parents of color, this is a really heavy time right now, and it's very easy to shut down and not want to be involved in the conversation. So my advice to the parents of color would be to remain open. I've said this before. Remain open and remain approachable and willing to have those hard conversations. When we have forums like this, it's really hard to get representation and to get people willing to speak up about it. If someone comes to you and asks, for your experience and your stories in a town where we are, I believe less than 2% representation, it's important to find that courage to go ahead and have those hard conversations, because if we don't, there's no room for education and learning. So that's my first piece of advice. My second piece of advice would go to parents of students for the remainder of the town that may have friends that are Black or in marginalized groups, is to understand that it is okay to make mistakes in this area because many children simply don't know. And I think the key is to remain open and be willing to change and ask the questions. Where we run into problems is where folks tend to draw a hard line and they're not really willing to listen. They're pretty set in their ways with their experiences, whether that has come down generationally or they've learned it on social media, which we've talked about extensively tonight, where they're drawing hard lines without understanding what it's really like to be a person of color. Yeah. So my advice to the parents would be to really try to open your ears and ask questions and understand what racism really means in Elmhurst. And if you're not clear, just refrain from really drawing a hard line. Hard lines, that's what causes a lot of the adversity that's going on, where the students don't feel heard, they shut down. That leads to depression, that leads to bullying, it leads to peer pressure, it manifests in many different ways. So if we can prevent that, I think we will be well on our way to seeing some change. As a parent of, children, biracial children as well, it's really difficult sometimes to stomach, some of the things that my kids hear and see, things that come across social media. I'm going to be honest with you, a lot of it we've become desensitized to. We rise above it. Unfortunately, many people can't. It's very hurtful. They don't know how to react to it. They may not be as outspoken. So a mindfulness about depression is huge. A lot of our students are not, performing well academically, or they may be struggling in other ways because they are depressed and they are suppressing things that they should be talking about. So I think if we have, an open sense where, kids feel comfortable walking down the street, not everybody's going to agree on all the racial tension that's going on in our country right now, but I think having respectful conversations about it, the nastiness really should stop. There's a lot of nastiness, a lot of I'm better than you, a lot of you don't matter, as my daughter mentioned, a lot of using of the N-word. These types of things, honestly, are learned behaviors. So I have to make a plea to the parents that if you see it or you hear it, let's not continue to perpetuate that into your children. It's going to happen in their adult years. It's not going to make for a very fulfilling life for them later. And who wants to live a life of constant agony? Nobody wants. We all want to be happy and be at peace. So that would be my plea to the parents. And also just to remember that these are children. When we see really hurtful things that children say and do, use it as an opportunity for change and have grace. It's very hard to not be angry. I get angry, but I remember I've worked with Jackie in the past. I love children. I dedicated a lot of my life to serving children and employing them. And I really want to see them be happy and learn and change. And we have to have room and space to allow them to do that and grow. With respect to what was said earlier about representation at York, I think that was the nail on the head. There is definitely a lack of representation amongst the staff at York. So we're seeing that students are not really comfortable opening up. The benefit that we do see is that we have plenty of folks at York that are in line with marginalized communities and with the Black community, whether they are not, they may not be Black themselves, but they are still open to it, and they're having those discussions. They're leading the student groups even. So that is there. But really, being able to see someone that looks like you is extremely important. If you look at the rankings of school in the state of Illinois, many of them are in the city of Chicago, where you have an incredibly diverse staff. And so that's just something to keep in mind, that it does make a difference when you see people in leadership positions that look like you. And I think children will feel a lot more comfortable, having those hard conversations when that happens.
Would you want to respond, Hannah?
No, I agree with her 100%. I think people don't, the general population doesn't always understand that tokenism is a thing, and it really affects individuals and how they feel.
Can you describe what tokenism is for people that might not know?
Yeah, so emotionally, it's being in a place to where you're the only person who looks like you, right? And so when you're constantly the only Black in a working group, or you're the only woman at work, or you're the only this or only that, you have a hard time relaxing and being yourself and not feeling vulnerable in those moments. And so when you have, maybe a handful of children in a school and nobody actually, kind of looks like them, where all the teachers look different, then there's a feeling that this person may not understand my struggles. They may not understand when I bring something to them that may be racial, or they're going to invalidate my feelings to some point and say, oh, maybe they didn't mean it that way, or, this wasn't that. I know that
What
kid.
Cassidy, I think, maybe was talking about, too.
Absolutely, absolutely. I know that kid, he wouldn't do that to you. Maybe he meant something different, right? And so that's just simply invalidating what people feel in that moment, instead of just believing her in that moment and saying, no, this thing actually happened, and what I'm going to do is try to help you through this, right? Whether it's emotionally or through some, administrative action.
One of the things, Victoria, you were kind of talking about, talking to the kids. And I think from when we had spoken before, we've talking about, if we're not talking to the kids, who is talking to the kids, right? And that's really a lot of social media going on.
Yeah.
Right?
I think,
Absolutely. I think that, and I feel so strongly about, there are so many people doing a lot of hard work right now. And I can't stress enough, because there is a sense of helplessness that's going around. It's like, we're trying everything. Are we doing enough? Are people listening? Why are we still having these issues? And I just, people are working really, really, really hard. And the issue that we're up against in this town, honestly, is representation. That's the problem, is that there's just not enough voices. But people are working hard and they are trying. So I think if we continue, down that path, that we're really going to make some strides in the right direction. And, just to speak on the notion of tokenism, this is something that even as a working professional, I've experienced this in my life as well. Being a Black girl who loves science and math, right? There's not a lot of me. And so that I've experienced that. I think that, unfortunately, when we have our friend groups, and this happens even as adults, there's a lot of sadness and fear and heartbreak associated with hearing that someone in your friend group experiences racism. Right. When things are being dismissed and they're being swept under the rug, oh, no, they didn't mean it like that, or that's not how it was. That is coming from a place of fear, and that they couldn't possibly believe that someone that they love is going through something like that. Yeah. And so that's another piece of advice that I would have, is if someone opens that door and lets you in and says, hey, I'm experiencing this, definitely listen. And you may not have the answers, but as we're doing here tonight, just listening and figuring it out, and making sure that it's a safe space, I think is the first step. Right now, the kids don't feel safe. They're getting attacked very harshly for having a point of view or for being different. This stems beyond racism. There's a lot of it going on in the LGBT community. York has tremendous groups that I would love to see have representation, you know, and interactions with the city council, because they're really working hard, and I just think they feel like we're here, but nobody really cares about what we're doing. And so then they get louder and louder and louder because nobody's listening. So I think if we can, you know, bridge that gap, that it'll really be helpful.
Yeah, thank you. No, I absolutely hear you, and I appreciate the information. And I think one of the things the past several months, what we keep hearing is we're all reading, we're having these conversations, we're talking, we're being more open, and we're trying to learn. And I know the library has been a wonderful source. I've seen a lot of different things pop up of their programming, and I'm just wondering, Tracy, some of the stuff we're talking about tonight, are there books that the library has out? I'm certain there are, but is there anything you can think of that you could recommend, or anything that, I don't know if you guys have a special table with books on this topic recently, but even something that maybe kids could dive into and learn more about. I know you guys have programming. I know that's on the library's website. But is there anything else you can offer for resources where people can get this education, not just the adults, but the kids?
So one of the things I did in preparing for this is I kind of went through our catalog, and I mean, yes, we have books pretty much in every age group that talk about everything from race to LGBTQ. And then we have a lot of resources for educators, parents, and guardians. So the resources are definitely here. We mentioned the programming. There's also a social justice learning group that has been going on. Their next meeting is November 5th, and they're reading the book Stamped: Racism, Anti-Racism, and You. So I don't know the best way really to communicate this to everybody, Jackie, you tell me, but I mean, I can get this list of books that I kind of brought together to someone if it's something you want to get out, or,
sure.
But yeah, we have a ton of resources. Other than like the books and programs, prior to the coronavirus, I'm sure most of you know the library has our teen space and our middle school space where the kids can kind of come in and hang out after school, and it's kind of like I don't want to say a safe space, but a safer space. And I would do programming with the teens and stuff like that. Unfortunately, that's not in existence right now, and we're hoping one day it definitely will be. I actually was planning a program on bullying prior to the pandemic, and then honestly it just kind of fell on the wayside. So I might be trying to get a hold of Cassidy soon to work on something.
It's got to be really hard with everything virtual at this point too for you guys.
It is. And I even with the teens, I would do a spill, and I would just kind of come into the teen space once a week for like an hour and hang out with them and talk about issues they were having. I tried to do that virtually. It really didn't take off. But they're staring at screens all day for class work. So they don't want to get on the screen and look at me now.
Well, yeah.
And Jackie, if I
Yes.
could just interject really quick.
Is this Victoria or Cassidy?
I just wanted to say, this is Victoria.
Okay, all right, thank you.
For the library, I just wanted to say that honestly, I feel that they've done such a wonderful job. During the summer, we went there under the reservation system, and I took my son, and in the children's library, I mean, they had wonderful displays set up with many racial injustice books and just biographies, and there were so many LGBT sections, and that, I took some pictures of it, and I thought it was really great. And I don't know that people realize sometimes that those things are there. And it's not hard to find because, they've taken the time to really organize everything for you in wonderful displays so you can see them. And even within the elementary schools, my son is at Field. The librarian there has done a really great job of, really exposing the children, I have to say. My son comes home often and tells me different things that he has learned. And so I just wanted to at least say, I know that a lot of parents may not see that that's out there. So if they're listening, please utilize those resources. because they are happening. And especially with the younger children, oftentimes they don't talk about their day when they come home. So ask them, what did they learn when they went to library, or what did they learn in social studies? Try to strike up those conversations, because you'll be surprised at some of the things that they retain. I do think that the schools and the library, they're doing a really, really great job at exposure. So we just have to continue that conversation with the kids at home.
Thank you. Thank you.
Sure.
I'm going to switch over really quick, or not so quick, to Stephen. Can you talk to us a little bit about what you see here? Anything with I know you get 99% of the time you're working with the police department. Has issue of, I know you go sometimes in neighborhood disputes or neighbor disputes, and called on youth and called on adults, a lot of different things. At any time, have you had to deal with anything with race at this point?
It'll be peppered in with maybe a bigger issue, or not necessarily a bigger issue, but just other issues at play. And as time goes on, they'll kind of bring me in. I don't want to say as a last resort, but they'll say, look, we've tried everything. Let's bring in somebody who we can say is a completely neutral party. I'll listen to every side. And it'll sometimes creep through, and it'll almost come from a place of anger, you'll see. And so that's when you start to wonder, okay, where is this coming from, right? Where was this instilled? We talked about, is it a learned behavior, right? So this was a learned behavior at some point. So now you're equating your emotions and you're tying it to the race of one of the neighbors, an issue, somebody part of the issue here. You'll also see that with some youth that kind of walk through the office door, where they'll bring things up and not necessarily even recognize that it's an issue. Right? They'll certainly bring it up, and it almost, you have to say, hold on a second, can you say that back to me again? Just want to make sure that I'm
So
hearing
natural,
it
they don't
correctly.
even realize they're doing
right.
it.
And it'll be tied into, and I know we sound like a broken record with it, it'll be tied into social media, or even music or video games, or what they're seeing on TV, that type of thing, or YouTube channels. But it'll be, like I said, it'll be peppered in there, and it's important, I think, for us to take a step back and recognize how important it is. Take it out and deal with that as its own entity, as opposed to, okay, here's the entire problem as a whole. We really need to separate it out and break things down piece by piece to show them how important it is. Because if we can do that for them, and hopefully mom, dad, guardian, whatever adult that they're with comes in with, then they can hopefully take that information and spread it to their friends, the people that they're hanging with, the school, hopefully. Because I think it is a top-down issue. I know for me, it took going through school and experiences and different, jobs and trainings for me to take a step back and go, hang on a second. Let me think about how I was raised, right? I was so incredibly fortunate to grow up in the suburbs with a two-parent household and have the opportunities to go to college. And I didn't necessarily recognize that until I started really working, because as a teenager, you don't necessarily even open your eyes to that type of thing.
Right.
And so how can we expect the youth of today to do that when I couldn't even do that? Right. And it took several of those light bulb moments.
Well, and we weren't having these discussions when we were younger, right?
Of course not.
Those discussions weren't happening. So one aspect where it's fortunate for our kids that we are having these discussions, but also going forward of how do we build inclusion? How do we get that message across to our kids of inclusion? There's that old thing, include Johnny at the playground, include so-and-so. If you see a kid sitting alone, there's a buddy bench. We've done a lot of that, but this goes beyond that. How do we have inclusion with these kids that are different, that have different, from different backgrounds, different racial backgrounds, religion, culture? Is there anything you guys could talk about that would include that?
I think after you've gained some knowledge and you've had several of those light bulb moments, right?
Yeah.
We call that checking your privilege, right?
Yeah.
So being able to check your own privilege. We all have some privilege at some level, some more than others, right? But being able to check that you have these privileges that are given to you simply because of something, somehow you've been born into some of the privilege, right? And then I think the other thing we do is to understand our own identity. What does it mean for you not to be a person of color? What does it mean to you to be around people of color? Like, how important is that for you, right? Because we can't teach our children anything that we don't understand ourselves, right? So I had to come into my own Black identity before I could give it to my children, right? So having that knowledge, having those light bulb moments, being able to understand, what your race means to you personally, and then sitting down and having those uncomfortable conversations, it always leads back to having the conversation, being open to the conversation, people recognizing where their biases come in, right? Recognizing, I didn't know I had this bias, but obviously because of my behavior, I did something that kind of, illustrated that I had this bias.
Well, and you talked about privilege, and I think all of us the past several months have heard the term white privilege, and there's a lot of discussion going on about that. Is what does that mean? What exactly does that mean? Could you help kids that are watching this tonight understand, if they've heard that term around, what that means?
So white privilege is privilege that you're born into simply because your skin is white, right? And so we talk on the opposite hand of that is oppression and discrimination and systemic laws that help keep people down. And so when you're born into that level of privilege, that means you don't have to experience that, right? I had a conversation with a colleague about because the natural response to white privilege is that, well, I was poor growing up, or I didn't live in a two-parent household, or I experienced bullying when I was younger. And that usually the answer to that is, were you poor because you were Black? Were you bullied because you were Black? Right? Were you in a one-parent household because your father got discriminated against and was sent to prison? So all of these things that happen to the Black community, it may look the same, but it's absolutely not the same. It's simply because of something that I can't change, something that I walk into a room and the first thing that you can see is my femininity and my skin color and then my hair. So, and so then it's like, before I even get to tell you my name, or before I even get to tell you, all the wonderful things that I'm working on, this is the first thing you see. And your biases, then, you prejudge from your biases.
So I just want to say that Kiana and I worked together, and she gave a presentation through Zoom to us therapists. And as much as we think that we knew or we know, I think we're all asking all kinds of questions, right? And that the hair comment that she just mentioned, that's the second time I've heard that, and it's something that I've never knew. People go up to people and touch their hair like that, and could you tell that example a little bit? Well,
I think Victoria brought it up a little bit ago about being a Black professional, right? And a lot of times what we're told is that the standard is straight hair, the standard is lighter skin, and you're not professional until you look a certain way. And so it becomes a source, especially for Black women, it becomes a source of self-esteem, kind of where our self-esteem lies. Because we, unfortunately, and this is where privilege comes back in, we have to think about how our hair is perceived.
I heard a kid at one of the things that have happened in town talk about that same issue for kids.
Right, and so a lot of the school rules, a lot of this systemic issues that we have is that the dress code doesn't really take into account cultural concerns.
Interesting.
Right, so if I wear my hair in braids and you're telling me that's wrong, you're telling me my culture is wrong. You're telling me the way my hair comes out of my head or how I choose to wear it is not professional, because really the conclusion is because it's not white.
Thank you for sharing. I appreciate it. One of the other terms that we hear a lot around, and I just want to maybe, again, this is information for the parents to know, to kind of teach the kids, but then kids to kind of know, too, these terms that they might be hearing around. Microaggressions, and we've touched on some of that. Can either one of you or Tracy on the phone or somebody define what that is?
Oh, they come in different forms.
Yeah.
I think the one that I've gotten a lot is the backhanded compliment.
Passive aggressive?
Yes, very, very, and microaggressions tend to be a little bit passive aggressive, but you're cute for a Black girl, or you speak very articulately, right? So it's those assumptions, oh, you don't act Black, right? Where they think it's a compliment, but really, actually, in reality, it's not at all.
Okay. And on the line, Victoria, can I just, are you there still? Okay, thank you.
Yes, I am, definitely. I can definitely speak on the issue of microaggression. That happens a lot, even in adulthood, and it's so, a lot of the folks that say these things are literally oblivious, and I know that it's not coming from a place of hate, but I think it's just that they don't realize that it comes off that way to people of color. So saying things like, as was mentioned, you don't sound black, or, I think I've had someone say to me, well, you'll never get fired because you're black, or you don't seem like you've had any struggles in your life. You had two parents growing up, so I don't think that you've experienced systemic racism. Yeah. There's like a lot of little pokes and prods that can happen that, the best way to notice it is that as a person who is not a person of color, those things would never be said to you. No one would ever come to you and say that because of your skin color, oh, you'll never be fired because you're white, or, or something like, or just make a comment like about your hair, or you're so well-spoken. Like, no one will ever say those things. Yeah. So it's almost, it creates a sense of you're different and you're more in line with what we feel comfortable with. So even by saying that in a complimentary way, it leaves the impression that you're different than the rest of the black community, mm-hmm. right? Or that you're different than other people of color and you're more like us. And that's not okay, because the reality is, and I think we all know this, there are so many different types of dialects and people in this country and in this world, and people come from all kinds of backgrounds. And we talk about, backgrounds of people of color, single parent households, things like that. That is not racially independent. I mean, there's so much of that. The divorce rate in this country is at 60% right now. So I think it's unfair to have those slight microaggressions about, oh, well, if they had a father in the home, then they, those types of things, because that's not always the case. That spawns beyond race. But I think it comes from a place of comfort to where, when we talk about white privilege, it's because it has been instilled in many generations that, unfortunately, they feel that the white community is elite or higher or better. And these are the reasons why, right? We're higher because of this. We're higher because of more education. The problem is that playing field is being leveled now, so those arguments are no longer valid, right? So the microaggressions don't make sense anymore. And now they come off as just bullying and just bad behavior. So I think that some of those things just really don't need to be said. I don't think, the other thing I want to point out too is, again, the conversation tonight is very, very one-sided. I always speak to the black community as well, because we do it as well, right? We do it too. We have implicit biases. We have generational biases. I have people within my own family that are not happy that I married outside of my race. So it happens on both sides of the fence. So I just want to make sure that that's blatantly clear, that these types of biases are apparent on both sides. And we really have to be the generation that stops it. I mean, this year, if nothing else, when we come out of 2020, I think it's going to be pretty clear that if we don't do something now, we're going to leave our kids a really destroyed country. So we've got to make some changes now on both sides of the fence, and really try to bridge the gap.
And it really starts with the parenting, is what we're kind of all coming to terms with today. And it does. I do want to go on to some questions that we have here tonight. We'll kind of just, maybe whoever wants to chime in to answer. First one is from a parent asking for her child. Her son has been friends with the same kids since kindergarten. He knows they don't say good things to a few certain kids and how they look different, and doesn't say anything because of fear he's going to lose his friends. Yeah. They make indirect comments, and the kids that are different laugh along, even if it's mean. It's uncomfortable, and he just doesn't know what to do. Is there any advice that we would have?
Well, I mean, we need to kind of, how old do we think this child is at this point, right? So friends for years.
Same
so we're
friends since
thinking-
kindergarten.
Sure, so we'll say middle school, early high school, fine. So I think first is just information gathering. If you're an adult and you're the parent, you want to find out everything you can about this. Do staff members know? Have there been any interventions? Have the appropriate staff, whether it be counselors, psych, social workers at the school, been notified? And then I think it opens the door for dialogue, not only with your child, but hopefully you would be close with the parents of the other friends to have that discussion. Hey, have you noticed this type of conversation from your son or daughter? Because if the child's picking up on it, they're curious and they're going to want to know. So I think it opens that door. Hopefully it's already been talked about, but now you know that you can then begin discussing that.
I think too, if you add to your children, how would you want to be treated, right? Helping them recognize and have that voice to stand up and say, okay, so you see that they're doing something that's not right. Would you want someone to speak up for you? Would you want someone to hang out with these friends even though that they're doing something that's not right? Right? And being able to say, hey, I don't think what you guys are doing are right, and giving them that encouragement to stand up.
And it's the why. Why do you think this is wrong? What are they saying that's not okay?
Kind of empowering our kids to say, is this something you would want? Let's empower them, almost giving it back to them, educating them a little bit, but, fear of losing his friends, they make indirect comments, and the kids that are different laugh along, even if it's mean. So that's the other piece to it is this child notices the kid that's getting comments said to them, laughing with them.
Comment you said before. If you're not aware of it, you might just laugh along too, saying, "Oh,
They're supposed to be your friends.
This is what friends are supposed to do, right? How else would I know?"
Right.
And sometimes that can be interpreted as an uncomfortable laugh, right?
Yeah,
Depending on how old they are, they may not understand fully, how to respond to something when their feelings are hurt.
Just a defense mechanism. These are my friends. I don't want to lose them, even if it means I'm going to get made fun of.
Yeah.
Tracy, on the phone, is there anything else?
Jackie,
Yeah.
sure. I'm sorry. This is Victoria.
Hi, Victoria.
That whole sequence that breaks my heart, because I know that kids, when they're saying things that are hurtful, and then if someone does point it out, sometimes they don't realize it and they feel horrible, and they don't know the impact of the things that they say and how they land on others. I think depending on the age of the child that submitted the question, there's going to come a point in time where children and even adults really do have to decide if that relationship with those friends is expendable, right? Because if they've gotten to a point where they know that, again, I talk about hard lines, if they know that that person is not willing to change and not willing to open, you try to have a conversation with them, and they seem pretty set in their ways about it, then it might be time to, let go of that relationship and love them from a distance. I mean, that happens all the time. So it's really, really hard with kids because there's so much peer pressure. That uncomfortable laugh is real.
Yes.
They're really worried about losing their friend group. If I go up against this group, who's going to want to hang out with me? Girls can be incredibly, cliquish. You want to try to be in line. That happens a lot. And so, if one person's kind of being a bully, they just kind of don't say anything. But nowadays, I do feel that this is the time. This is a turning point where kids do feel more confident. If you look at the outspokenness in the community, a lot of it's coming from college students and high schoolers. So they're starting to realize, it is okay to speak up, and I will have a flock. I will have a landing point when I do that. I'm not going to be by myself. So I think the more that kids feel confident doing that and feeling that it's okay to be right, they don't have to follow the bullies, then they'll do it. So it's up to us as parents and as community leaders to keep creating that open space for them, and I think we'll see a change.
Yeah. Thank you.
I think we've seen that too in certain areas. I'd say 10 years ago, the adolescents, especially towards certain groups, right? Kids with disabilities, they would be seen as outcasts. Whereas now if you walk through the school halls, you'll see inclusion and clubs and activities. The LGBTQ population, they're more widely accepted now in the high school setting than they certainly were 10 years. There are miles to go. But my next, correct, you're right, the needle's moving. And so my hope would be with conversations like this, with exposure, with not only sympathy but empathy being built, that we're going to hopefully can look back on this as the year, right, as Victoria said, that we have to come out of this and start moving in a different direction. Otherwise, we're going to be stuck spinning our wheels or going backwards.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. I'm going to go on to the next question. I have a friend, again, I don't have an age, but I have, on this one, I have a friend who doesn't fit in with my main group of friends. I hang out with her, but my main group doesn't want her. I ask them why, and they just say they don't like her. Sometimes I wonder if it's because of her being black, but I don't ask. I don't know what to say or do, but I do wish we can all hang out together. I feel bad for my friend. I feel bad for not including her. Can you help me?
I think about the messages that I give to my children, because I think even middle schoolers kind of go through this where, there's a kid at school who may be different, who might identify differently, and say, if you are truly that person's friend, then you will be their friend, right? And no one should be able to sway you from that decision. So again, we go back to empowering your students, your kids to make those hard decisions, because I think sometimes us as adults, we don't get there sometimes till we're 30, being able to make those hard life decisions, right? So empowering them to say, okay, this is how you make a decision. Is that person your friend? Do you like hanging out with that person? Is it wrong for your other friends not to want to hang out with that person for no apparent reason? Then you may have to then make a decision. And what's your decision from there?
And it's those conversations that lead to and help facilitate the identity creation, right? Because at this age, what we're assuming here, all that's happening is figuring out who we are in the world. And that's why you'll see a student or a young person maybe dress a certain way for 6 months to a year.
Right.
And then it's completely different for the next year because we're trying to figure out what's going to fit with us and our personality. So you could see, this young person saying, I really don't like the way that this one friend is being treated, but I don't understand it. I mean, that conversation would help facilitate the, okay, why don't you like that? What about it don't you like? How are you going to change it? What's going to make you feel better?
Right.
And then leading to those light bulb moments that we talked about before.
Yeah.
And that could then open up the, you know what, I'm going to potentially not be with these people anymore if they're going to treat one of my friends like this. Cut it off there.
Again, empowering the kids, too.
Absolutely.
Tracy, I know you're still on the phone. Is there anything else with both of those questions that you would like to add?
I think with the last one, like Stephen said, empowering the child to decide what they want to do with those friendships. And I mean, I would tell that child to ask their friends why they don't like this one person. Often things like race are things people don't want to talk about, and I think the conversation needs to happen if we're going to get past it. And if it is a race thing, then that child needs to make a decision as to, what side of the fence they're going to be on. But empowering our kids to ask those questions and have those conversations is only going to lead us down a better path.
It just brings, I do have one more question that's here, but I want to kind of go on that is, how would kids go about having these discussions with each other? We talk about us having discussions with our kids, adults with kids. How would kids go about it? And I hear what Cassidy has been saying, it's kind of coming out more at the high school level, but as we talked about, this happens at such a young age. How do we start this at a younger age? What do we do to kind of encourage our kids to start even having these discussions with each other?
I think it could start with not just trying to facilitate the discussions, but we all know youth and adolescents, even adults, we want to feel like we're part of something.
Sure.
So creating these clubs, these activities, whether it be in or outside of the school or park district or anything within the community, hopefully you then create a sense of community and you have a variety of young people, and then the adults will be there too. And those conversations will just happen organically. I think if you run the risk of having some issues if you force this.
Yeah.
If you force these issues, it'll become incredibly apparent very quickly
Yes.
the older that they get, and then almost becomes there's a sense of resentment, you know, and it's, okay, we get it, it's been stuffed down our throat. But if it's introduced and it seems more natural and more organic.
From like a topic.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Just a discussion and more from a, what have you noticed, you know, real life examples. So it's not the manufactured discussions.
Let's sit down and have a talk.
Right. It's the stuff that people see on a regular basis.
But through our education to these kids, we hope again that we're empowering them too, if they see something, say something.
Right.
I know you and I had
Right.
talked about that, to say something and speak up a little bit.
And that should be built into curriculum.
Yeah.
I really do feel like
Absolutely.
there should be a social emotional
Absolutely.
curriculum built into a health class or even a science class. If you're taking any sort of human development and you create some sort of piece to go with the psychology of it, you can do that with young kids.
Yeah, no, I
That's
agree.
easily done, but it's typically avoided.
We always have this discussion. I wish some of this stuff, by the time they get into the therapist chair, was educated on. There's a lot of times simple life skills that
Right.
would be beneficial.
Even in high
in
school,
curriculum.
maybe you'll have a
Yeah.
week
Right.
of social emotional learning.
Sure.
I think part of what
Yeah,
we
and Jackie, if I could just chime in, this is Victoria.
Hi.
I totally 100% agree with that. I was going to say the manufactured conversations are just bad.
Yeah.
I think that if, exposure, it's all about exposure. Sometimes if you just allow children to be in the presence of children that are not like them or don't look like them, these things are going to happen organically. And what we're suffering from right now is a lack of exposure. Kids have just not been in a situation where they've had to experience the life or, have conversations with someone that doesn't look like them or maybe didn't grow up like them. And so I think if we just allow that exposure to happen, and that's gonna solve 75% of the problem. I think right now, trying to shove things down, their throats and say, hey, you have to listen, and it makes it more difficult.
Sure.
As I said before, now is the time. Kids have a voice right now. They're being different is okay, and being different is good. And I think now you just have to continue with that momentum. I agree that some type of curriculum will be great, a life skill curriculum. And again, this is about openness. So people have to be willing to talk and have, if someone asks you a question that could be seemingly offensive, but it's a legitimate question, as a person of color, can you sit through that conversation and answer it? I know I can do it, Cassidy can do it, but a lot of people can't do it. So then the door is closed, the conversation doesn't happen, and now we get nowhere. So I think on both sides, if we can really, try to bridge that gap and be open and listen, that we're gonna make some changes.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. All right, I'm going to go on to the last one I have here. I don't think there's anything else. I recently realized, it's kind of what we were talking about, sometimes it looks like when you grow up and kind of realize what happened some years back. I recently realized I ignored a kid years ago because he just seemed to be weird. He wore weird clothes, he ate different food at lunch, and just was different. I now know it was his culture in a different culture. I can't believe I did this and wouldn't even think about doing it today. I wish I can go back and say something. Is that just strange to go back years later and apologize? And what if he didn't even know what I was doing? What if he didn't know what I did? So can you go back? Do you recognize it and say, hey, I did, now that we're,
I hope.
I don't know the age.
Hope we all do that. It's a sign of maturity.
Yeah.
I don't think we can necessarily go backwards, but I think a conversation you and I had about privilege is that not to be shameful, right, of certain things that you've done, but to do better in the future.
You literally said, don't feel guilty.
Right.
about
Don't
having that
feel
privilege.
guilty about your white privilege. Don't feel guilty about certain things that you've done before. What you can do is move forward in a better way. Right. So once you've had those light bulb moments, because honestly, that kid may not have even noticed, or that it has been built up, those microaggressions that, she's saying that she did, may have built up so much that what she did at a young age doesn't compare to what they've experienced as adults. Right. And so oftentimes we can't go back, but what you can do is do better moving forward.
Had you know what we know now back then,
Right.
things, right.
It's the guilt that can be associated with
Yeah.
the privilege or white privilege, plus the almost if somebody's encountered with it, it can be so defensive. People can become so defensive. Well, no, it wasn't as bad as such and so, or it was actually worse than such and so. And that's not the point.
Right. It keeps you stuck.
Absolutely.
It keeps you stuck. And so what you do is share your privilege, right? Reach out to those who don't necessarily have as much privilege as you do and be able to give that to them and offer that to them, making sure that there's representation in the schools, making sure that people are exposed or immersed into other cultures so that they know how not to have that other microaggression, that curiosity, right? Can I touch your hair? Why does your skin look like that, right? So that ignorant curiosity can build up in someone else. So that immersion and that exposure is how you start to give your privilege back.
Would you agree that at its root level, it's just an acknowledgement of everything?
Right.
So I think that's probably, if we're looking to explain, that's probably the best place to start.
Yeah.
Just acknowledging it. Okay.
Tracy, and anything from you as well that you'd like to add?
I would say
Sure.
to share that light bulb moment with others around you, so they can be aware of, maybe they had some of the same behaviors in the past, so they don't have those behaviors going forward.
Okay, we have a few minutes left. I just wanted to wrap things up, and I'm just wondering from each of you, is there anything else that we haven't talked about that's been on your mind that you would like kids or parents to know?
Nothing super specific, but when we're talking about bias-based bullying versus kind of the generalized bullying, because tonight's discussion is really on that bias-based bullying. And unfortunately, there isn't a ton of research out there that can back up proven or effective methods to combat or to really put in place to be preventative. The only thing that we can tell so far right now is that if we can allow young people a sense of safety and security, that's going to do more than our typical bullying response of talk to an adult, listen to what the youth has to say. So it starts, I think, at the home, but also at the school. And when I say safety and security, I don't just mean from harm. I mean food, shelter, clothing, a sense of waking up and knowing where your next meal is going to be, how you're going to get to school, who's going to be home, when you come home, what responsibilities do you have. But certainly we see and we hear what the schools are doing. But it's also a combination of what happens at the home. So if we can work on that from the top-down approach that we've mentioned before, that can lend itself to feeling more safe and secure as it relates to the bias-based bullying.
Yeah, thank you.
I absolutely agree. I think my final message is to the parents. Pay attention to the things that you're saying. Pay attention to your own biases because your children are listening and they're paying attention and they're mimicking the things that they see. So if you are saying things that you probably shouldn't be saying or that you wouldn't want your children saying, then maybe you should check your own privilege, check your own identity, check the racism and biases that you have because they can be absorbed by your children.
And Tracy, was there anything you'd like to add here that maybe we haven't talked about or to conclude with tonight?
I have to agree with my fellow panel members, and especially when, for the parents, the kids learn by example. Kids don't learn, they're learned behaviors. It's not stuff that they're born with. So absolutely being careful about what you're saying and what you're doing around your children, being willing to have those conversations with your children if it's brought up, about any bullying or racial tensions or anything like that. And if you're not open to having those conversations, find someone that your child can talk to so they don't feel it's a taboo situation that they shouldn't be talking about.
Thank you. And Cassidy and Victoria, thank you so much for being with us tonight and sharing your stories and your knowledge and just these raw feelings that you both have. It's so important that we all heard them here tonight, and I just can't thank you enough for just showing us all this information and giving us all this information and showing us what is really hard to show. So I just want to thank both of you for being here because this
You're very welcome.
This has been really a moving educational discussion this evening, and just all of you, Kiana, Tracy, Stephen, Victoria, Cassidy, thank you guys so much in participating in this. I appreciate this open and honest conversation. And thank you to all the kids and families who've been watching right with us. This will be videoed, as we know now, but it also can be shown later on in a day or two. I hope you're able to take something away tonight and what you heard this evening and pass it on to your kids or kids. I hope you walked away and learning something new. We appreciate your dedication in learning about this topic, and the City of Elmhurst, the Youth Commission, we really genuinely thank you for beginning with these discussions this evening. Have a great night. Thank you.